Hello, and welcome to Gritting in Color, sharing the creative endeavors of people of color. I'm your host, Kaybe, and today I'm joined with Austin Faber, a storyboard artist whose past projects include Owl House and the recently announced show on Netflix, Cuphead. How are you today, Austin?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for being on the show. So, what's it like being a storyboard artist?
So I actually was recently promoted from storyboard revisionist to storyboard artist only about 2 or 3 months ago.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And honestly, it's been great. You have a lot of control, like you have a lot of creative freedom when you do storyboards. Very demanding job. Like you really have to be on top of your time management. You have to draw very fast. You have to be very like creative, like on the fly, coming up with gags and dialogue and all of that. So it can get chaotic. But so far, it's really fun.
That's so cool. How did you get started in the industry?
Oh boy. Okay, so this is a really funny question. So the short answer is, I started as an intern in the Owl House over at Disney TV, but getting there was actually even a big challenge. So it all started actually during my summer between my third and my fourth year when I was attending Sheridan College over in Toronto. At Sheridan, you had to get an internship or some sort of co-op in order to get graduation credit. But Sheridan and the Canadian industry, like it's a lot less competitive up there. So everyone got placed except for me, who was the only LA native in my entire class. I was, gunning for internships at Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, Disney, and I didn't get any callbacks. So I kind of came back home with my tail between my legs, feeling like a failure. But I was actually contacted by this guy named Richard Chavez. Now, Richard I've known technically since I was 14. He's done Kung Fu with my mom ever since, I was, a wee lad. So I've known of him. We didn't really talk much, but I knew he existed. And long story short, he and my mom were talking, I guess, one day, because they're pretty close. Richard's like, oh, where's Austin been all this time? She's like, oh, he's studying animation up in Canada. And he's like, oh, I'm an animator, right? And she's like, what? And so like he calls me and he's like, I'm an animator. And I'm like, you're what? And he's like, I did lead production design on Prince of Egypt. And I'm just like, what? And he's like, where are you? And I'm like, hold on. And so when I came back home for the summer, I met up with him at the dojo. We talked a little bit, and he had just got laid off on a project, and so he had some free time. So he was like, hey, do you want to like come by my house a few times a week? I can like teach you or whatever. And I'm like, yes. So that became my co-op / internship, just working with Richard Chavez. And that whole summer, he made me unlearn things like the bad habits from school. He was like, don't worry about making things perfect. Don't worry about this. Actually, we're going to throw all this out. And I was just like, he had me kind of start from the ground up in terms of like my artistic vision. He was like, take this sketch. He handed me like a thick sketchbook. He's like, I want you to fill this up. And I'm like, well, what about like painting and all this? And he's like, don't worry about that. I want you to fill this up with just things that you love. And that's it. And I was like, okay, and he's like, no buts. And so like that was my whole summer, just him giving me assignments and me just sort of like learning to do things that I love. And that actually directly ties to Disney TV, because by the time I started fourth year, I had built up those habits so much from the summer working with him. Disney actually wound up kind of laying their eyes on me when I ran into them at the Ottawa Film Festival, because to them I was an immediate standout because my art was it was so personal. That was their words. And then that kind of carried me into them kind of suggesting I apply for the internship, and then I applied for the internship and they called me back, and then I got the internship, and then I went over to Disney. And that's how I really got my foot in the door, was honestly just being myself. Thank you, Richard, if you're listening to this.
Wow, that is a pretty unique journey. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, it was definitely not a straight path. This is fun. Wouldn't have had it any other way.
Did you always know that you wanted to go into animation or even going into storyboarding?
No, actually. I was avoiding animation like the plague when I was younger. It was because like, what was it? I had gotten this like animation magazine when I was maybe like 12 or 13, just in the mail, like by chance. And I think it had Bolt on the front of it, and I was like, wow, that looks really cool. And then I read the entire magazine, and in the insides were just like these students from like schools, because they had advertisements for schools inside there.
Yeah.
It was at their animation desks drawing, and then the captions were like, animation students drawing all day. And I'm just like, I don't know about that. And then at the end of the magazine, it was just like, it didn't really have anything. It was just literally like a day in the life of Craig McCracken. And he was a joke, but he was kind of writing about like how, interns from like Cal Arts and stuff like that would like try to show him stuff, but he was just really just interested because they're like students. And I'm like, well, then what's the point of going into animation if no one's gonna care what I have to say?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm just gonna be drawing the same thing over and over again. So I kind of just gave up on that, and I was like, I'm gonna go into comics, and hopefully my comic will be adapted into a TV show like in Japan. So that was my goal, and I almost got published in high school. Oh, I say almost, but like I found a self-publishing company in high school, and I was gonna go through them.
Ooh, almost though.
Yeah, that didn't work out either. But I always wanted to be a creator. That has just always been in my blood. I always loved creating things. I would make these elaborate stories with my like stuffed animals and like things like that growing up. But I never really wanted to go into animation specifically until like I did an internship, not art related, at Disneyland. I did the Disney College program, and when I did that, we took a few classes with Disney executives, and they were the ones that were kind of like, your final project is to make a career day presentation of what you want to do after the program. Comic artist wasn't an option, so I just picked animator. And during my presentation, my teacher was like, oh, this is actually a really good presentation. I didn't know you wanted to be an animator. And I'm like, oh, I actually want to be a comic artist. And he's like, oh, comic art you can't do that right now unless you're going to webcomics. Paper comics is dead unless you're going to DC or Marvel or Dark Horse. So unless you want to do webcomics, I'd recommend maybe going to animation school. And then almost not even like, I think it was literally that night, I went back to my Disney apartment with my roommates, and like Steven Universe came on. That's when I think it debuted. And I was just like completely blown away by the aesthetics and just like the story and everything. And I'm just like, who made this? And I looked it up, and obviously it was Rebecca Sugar, age 25, and I was just like, what the hell? Like I was like, she's so young and she has a show already. I was maybe 19 at the time, 19, 20. So I was kind of like, oh, so you think in 5 years I can have a show? What? And so I got really excited, and that reignited my excitement for animation, and the fire has never gone out ever since.
So I have to ask also.
Sure.
With you almost becoming a self-published comic book artist / writer / creator, but that not working out, does that have to do with your final presentation with your superior saying no?
Yeah, a little bit, because I remember he knew that I had like some ideas on the side, but even he kind of figured they'd be better for shows and animation than comics. I'm not saying that they can't be comics, but he was kind of like, I guess in his mind, a lot of the ideas I had seemed like they'd play better out on screen. I'm very dramatic, and I like cinematography, and I like acting and moving things. And so he's like, yeah, that's naturally, it seems like you want to work in animation. And I was like, okay. And I think he was right. I think I fit better maybe in animation than comics, although I do love comics as well.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there's a way you could do both?
Oh, no, absolutely. I know people for sure that do both. I think for me, comics are like, they take up a different side of my brain. I feel like comics is kind of more of like, it can be more illustrative depending on what kind of comic you're making. I'm more interested in being sort of a director, kind of overseeing something rather than sitting down and drawing a whole thing. Although I've made tons of comics in the past, like during my childhood, all I make is comics. That's all I could do. But now that I'm evolved and my artistic vision is a little more, it's stranger. I fall in love with more of the directorial side of sort of making stories rather than the sitting down and drawing everything out. I love drawing, but I don't think I'm made to do comics. That takes a lot of strength that I don't think I have anymore. A lot of mental strength.
When you say your art is strange, what do you mean by strange?
Well, I guess my artistic vision's a little strange in the sense that I have a lot of ideas that are really like, I would call them maybe subversive, a little, maybe not even divisive either. It's just that as I've grown up, I've had a lot of experiences that sort of evolved my vision. Best way I can explain it, it's kind of like with Roald Dahl or the writers behind the Twilight Zone. The stories they would tell are sort of, they're really fun, but they're dark, you know, and they have hidden messages kind of like slipped into them. And because of that, that's why I kind of say, since my vision's a little stranger now like that, it's my intent is no longer to make like, okay, I'm not as interested in the drawing aspect as much. I always love drawing. I'm not interested in like, oh, I want to draw this out and make it look super cool or whatever. I'm more interested in the impression, the voice behind everything. And that's like a directorial thing. Like I want to really be in charge of like what is being said and how it's being said and sort of overlook that sort of side of the process.
Do you feel in order to be successful in the animation industry, you have to be an artist?
That's a good question. My knee-jerk response is no. It's a bit of a layered answer because I think that in order to get into the industry, it helps to be an artist because a lot of studios, especially a lot of big studios, they're interested in that person's artistic vision and how that can help the project. So I think for the most part, yeah, like you have to be an artist. And there's different types of artists in the industry. Like there's writers and there's designers, there's board artists, even like production, I think there's an art to that. Production and editing. You have to have I think there's a love for the arts that shines through with the people that work in those departments. However, I've noticed mostly in art school that there are lots of people that can draw, but most of them could draw better than me, but they didn't really identify as artists. They kind of told me they wanted to just work. They wanted to be workers and they didn't really have artistic visions. And that was interesting to me. And I was kind of like, oh, I'm like, I guess there really is a place for that because we need that too. We need people that can just do the work. We need people that are artists that can do the work. We need people that are just purely like just pure visionaries, So there's a spectrum. So I'd say no, but that's not a bad thing either.
So, as a storyboard artist, what does your daily routine look like?
Well, my routine now is a little muddy because I started boarding during quarantine. But right now, I do a little bit of work in the morning, maybe from like 10 to noon. I do a little bit of work. But then I honestly will take a longer break in the middle of the day. And I'll do most of my work from like 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. because I work better at night, and I always have. Back when we were in the office, as a revisionist, I would get to work maybe at 10 o'clock because I realized no work got done before 10 o'clock, at least not the story department, at least not in my story department. And I noticed that like I kind of worked slower in the office because sometimes there's like meetings or sometimes there's distractions or whatever. So there was a routine there too, but it was less productive. And now that I'm home, I have full control over when I work, how much I work, if I even want to work, and so it's like one morning I can wake up and I can feel like garbage. And so I just decided not to work until maybe 3 p.m. And then I work until like 11. And it's not like an overworking thing. It's just sort of like that's how my brain is. And that's the best way for me to work, at least being at home. Mm-hmm. So I guess to answer your question, I don't really have much of a routine in the traditional sense, but I do work mostly evenings, if I could just say that.
So you were just promoted to a storyboard artist from a revisionist. Do you feel like there's a huge difference between the two positions, or do you feel like it's same coin but different side?
Oh, that's a good question. I think they're pretty different actually, because I think a revisionist, you're kind of like 50% editor, 30% I'd say maybe machine, and then 20% artist, because like really you're just addressing notes that somebody else wants. So you don't really have a lot of creative freedom or control. Revisioning is great because you can use certain opportunities to plus something or shine through or kind of give it a little extra flair. So that part's good. But storyboarding, just being a storyboard artist, it's like a whole different, it feels like a completely different animal because you're making everything from scratch for the most part. And I didn't realize it'd be this fun for me because I know people have kind of told me like, oh, board art, being a board artist is so like hard, like it's the worst thing, oh my god. And I'm just kind of like, oh, I can see it because it is difficult. And I haven't been a board artist for very long. I also think it helps that I'm working from home, so I I have more jurisdiction over how much work I put in. But yeah, I think they're very different. I think storyboard visioning is closer to editing, like being an editor, rather than being like a traditional like artist, because you're not really putting forward any vision or any opinion. You're kind of just addressing what somebody wants. That's just my take on it so far. It's been pretty different.
What is the difference between a storyboard artist and an animator?
So a storyboard artist, they tend to key out major actions. And depending on the show, it can be very rough. Whereas an animator brings that performance to life by like doing the in-betweens. They will oftentimes sort of elaborate on the action. Because some actions on storyboards are really like plain. It's like the character picks up a cup, walks off screen, end scene. An animator will maybe give that more personality. They might like have the character pick up the cup, do a little twirl, and then skip off screen. So that the animator will sometimes be able to put their own little vision into the scene, depending on the show, what the budget looks like.
Okay, then what is the difference between a storyboard artist and an illustrator?
Oh, I like this question. Best way I can explain it is I would say illustration is to photography as maybe storyboarding and animation is to film. So illustration is all about the single image, giving you all the narrative information that you need. So, you can look at a Gustav Klimt painting and that tells you everything you need to know. You get the impression, you get the emotion, it's all there. Whereas if you watched a Merry Melodies cartoon, those are shorts, but those give you an impression over a course of like 2 to 3 minutes. So that's what I would say is a major difference. The photography to film example is the best way I can explain it, because obviously photography is one image, film is multiple, but each have the intent of telling a story or communicating something. 2 different approaches.
And what are some specific roadblocks that you look out for?
Oh man, one of the first ones I experienced was people trying to label you. Like if you're going into storyboarding, because storyboarding is extremely competitive, especially now, people will like try to label you up and down. It is insane. It'll happen in school, it'll happen at cons, it'll happen on the internet. They'll be like, you're either feature or you're TV, period. It's very polarizing. And it wasn't until I mentored with Richard that he told me that made like no sense to him. He was like, "Who's telling you this? Like that doesn't even make sense." And I was like, "But the people say that you can only do one or the other." And he was like, "No, good boarding is good boarding. It's all about staging and acting and how you control the camera, and that transcends a silly label like TV or feature." So I would say, in terms of roadblocks, be very careful people are trying to label you, because you can sometimes brand yourself into a corner. Meaning, obviously, if you try too hard to be one or the other, you may wind up hurting your chances overall. Yes, my boarding portfolio were actually, technically speaking, they were more like feature boards, quote unquote. They weren't super clean. They weren't like keyed out like most television boards are, but like people that worked in TV seemed to like them because they just saw solid acting and solid staging, and that's all people really care about when they're hiring. So that's one. I think that's the biggest roadblock I would point out, is trying not to label yourself too early or at all. Not letting people do it for you either.
What support or resources do you recommend for someone trying to break in?
Ooh, the internet is an infinite source. I know I hate that answer because it's so vague, but I can definitely be a little more specific with it. So for me, I love going down rabbit holes, and you'd be surprised how deep these rabbit holes can go. So if you're interested in a specific subject, like let's say you want to go into storyboarding, what I would do is that I would pick a movie that I'd like, and first of all, I'd watch it, and I'd go to the credits, and I would literally like write down the names of people who boarded it, type them into Google, and then I'd find out things that they worked on, their history. Sometimes you strike gold. One of them has maybe like a blog or something, and they go in on like how they got to where they did, and then they point to somebody else that did the same thing, and it's crazy. So be curious. The internet is really like the best resource out there right now. Because before, you just go to a library, you have to like talk to people in person, like all that. You can still do that now. I 100% think that going down these rabbit holes is what taught me most of what I know, and that kind of ambition and that kind of skill transfers over when you do get a job. Knowing how to get information is a huge thing, especially if you want to work in like a creative field, like design or storyboarding or even production, even like production management, being a line producer, all of that. You need that skill set. That's what helped me, at least, sort of get my start. I found a lot of cool websites and blogs that helped me out. One I can list is Flooby Newbie. You can literally just type that in on Google, and it's like this massive storyboarding resource that I found like maybe 6 years ago by accident. Because again, I was down a rabbit hole, but it's cool now. Everyone seems to know about it because everyone keeps like sharing it. That's a big one. That's a big one. If you want to go into storyboarding, that I can expose for the public, so you guys can all check it out. It's awesome.
And speaking of portfolios, what would you recommend would be something good to include in one or something not to include?
Hmm.
Like, what would help someone's portfolio stand out the best you can describe in an audio medium?
Well, the first thing I'll say is to have a focus, which is huge. That's a huge thing. Because even if your work is good, if someone's looking at your art and doesn't know what you want to do, they're going to immediately sort of become disinterested. And I've seen this happen before my eyes multiple times during my fourth year in school. We had tons of people come in for portfolio reviews unannounced from like big studios like DreamWorks and Disney Feature came to visit, and I think some people from like Sony. It was crazy, and every single time they always gravitated towards the students that had a focus and knew the kind of more or less what they wanted to do. And the second thing that these students had in their portfolios were clear artistic vision. You know, they weren't really tailored to anything in specific. They weren't like, oh, here's my Disney portfolio, or here's my Pixar or Sony portfolio. It was just like, here's my art, here's what I do, and it was very clear that these students knew kind of who they were. But it's because it was only after hours and hours of like self searching and research and exploration that they get to that level. Yeah, I would say if we want specifics in a portfolio, if you're doing storyboards, maybe only three stories. I would include character interaction. That's a big one I don't see a lot, especially in student portfolios. Character interaction is huge. Make the story something you care about. I wouldn't use assignments that are kind of boring. Like, make something you care about. And for design, this is the only other portfolio I can kind of comment on because I've done a design and story portfolio. Design, you want to showcase your technical skill as well as your, I guess, your creative chops. Like, you want to make sure you have rotations, character rotations. You want to make sure you have good, like, strong posing. But when I got to Disney, I asked somebody what made like my art and the couple of interns I was with, like what made our art stand out. Because I genuinely did not, know. Because I was like, what are you guys looking for in interns? And they were saying that for us, it was that our art showcased strong drawing first. That was the first thing they look for, because a lot of people can design and they can make pretty colors, but they're like, we want strong draftsmanship, strong drawing, and then we are looking for people with an opinion. After that, people that can like make something funny or cool or whatever. So for design, definitely solid drawing comes first. So showcasing as much of that as you can through posing or rotations or mouth charts, just showing in any form you can that you can draw. And that's pretty much all I would say. Just have those, and the rest is up to you.
Nice, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, one more question. Is there any software you would recommend?
Well, that's actually really funny. So I was actually awful at software. I'm still not super great at it. Like, I didn't learn Photoshop until I got to animation school. So that was cool. I didn't really have like a computer or a laptop to draw on for my entire life. So I only drew things on paper. But now I would definitely recommend Photoshop or Paint Tool Sci, or just doing anything, learning how to draw digitally. It doesn't really matter what you use. I say Photoshop because it is the industry standard. I know people don't like to use it, but it'd be good to learn. There's some contention between like people who want to use Toon Boom Harmony to animate or TV Paint. I'd say TV Paint's beautiful because the output of in the production value is just incomparable. But once again, it's not the industry standard. Some kind of like, I would say, learn Toon Boom Harmony, learn Toon Boom Storyboard Pro and Harmony to get a job, and then do TV Paint on the side. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I don't really use a lot of software. I still use sketchbooks like a caveman.
Do you design your own storyboard panels or do you use templates?
So in Storyboard Pro, I it's all pretty much there for you. But when I make my own templates for storyboards, use I use artboards on Photoshop. That's a function you can do that just kind of creates a storyboard sort of sequence on your file.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much it. That's all. I just do them on paper.
Austin,
Mm-hmm.
what was your upbringing like?
Oh, this is a fun question. So my upbringing, it was mixed. So I had a pretty privileged childhood. Like my parents and we lived in like a really nice part of the valley. I attended really nice public schools. I was in a very safe environment. I never had to worry if was going to have a roof over my head. So that part of it, my childhood was very good. However, I didn't really get a lot of freedom growing up. I also was/am the only artist in my family, at least in the type of artist I am. So I didn't really have a lot of people I could connect with in my family. And I kind of had like Harry Potter syndrome in this it was funny, like in the sense that it seemed like everyone else in my family knew what I was and they knew who I was. They knew I was a very special kid. I wasn't good at school, but I was very intelligent. So they were kind of just like, what do we do with him? So they tried to kind of make me normal, so to speak, without my knowledge. And it wasn't until, again, I was maybe 18, 19 that I was like, oh, I'm an artist. Oh, that explains why all my childhood was so confusing. But my parents they're very loving, they're very protective in the sense that they wanted the best for me and my younger sister. And so they were afraid for me because I wasn't good at school. They were like, all right, well, you're a black man, so you can't be out here like, they know what happens to, black men who don't excel in school. And they didn't want that life for me. So they came off very strict and very demanding, which kind of in turn, like, made me more rebellious because I'm really stubborn. But ultimately it worked out because I found out I'm very intelligent, just not in a book smart way. I have ambitions that are sort of beyond academia, and I put all of that into my art post high school, which I know they're very, very happy about because I know they weren't really sure what was going to happen to me after I graduated. But it all worked out.
Are they supportive of you now as you continue to rise in the animation industry?
Yeah, they're very, very supportive, and they've learned more about the craft since I've started. Even I think since I got into animation school, I think they've taken it upon themselves to learn a little bit more of what's going on, like what animators do and what animation's like, even just to comfort them. But yeah, they're definitely very, very supportive, and they let me know on a regular basis, and it's very nice.
Aww.
Yes.
So you're a part of LGBTQ. How do you feel as a person of color and LGBT navigating through the animation industry?
Oh boy, that's a good question. It's difficult because there's not many of us. I have found that it's easier to be LGBT in the animation community than it is being black in the animation community. And I think it's because, like, I'm laughing because I'm just like, I guess I'll just get canceled, but whatever. I honestly feel like it's because, being LGBT, even before I got into animation, I've noticed it's something that, at least especially within the past, like, 20 years, white people have kind of started to coin a little bit more. It's a little more acceptable to talk about because it also affects white people. However, being black only affects black people. So within the industry, I feel like there's a lot of there's a lot of loud and proud members of LGBT. There's a lot of discussion around it, and to that regard, I think it's still not where it should be, but I think it's a little bit easier than being black. But being both gay and black puts me in this corner where I'm like, almost no people, like me, that I can truly relate to on like multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of LGBT representation in the industry, I think it's really bad. I think that's worse than if not maybe not worse, but on a similar level to the lack of representation of the Black community. I think it's because of the homogenous mindset of the straight white men up top on the food chain. And even though I've only been in the industry for about a year, to be very blunt about it, it's been apparent to me that they don't really have a lot of interest in representing those in the LGBTQIA plus community because it's politicized. And this was from my experience pitching a year ago to Disney. I pitched an intern project, and it was a heritage property, which means it's a property they already own. So I just pitched it to them, and I was like, "Hey, this is the thing. Also, I'm turning one of the characters bisexual because I figured it would make sense." And then Disney was kind of like, "That's cool. It's a little political, don't you think?" And I'm like, "No." And it was weird, like, it was kind of this weird back and forth. And I was like, "Oh, my gay kids exist. I don't know how it's political." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But again, in that moment, I kind of realized that's like, oh, this is political to them, you know? And then I did a little more digging, and I realized that this is on a broader scale, where it's like big studios tend to only care about representation when they need to fulfill like a bucket list. For example, insert studio name here has a quota of like, you need at least 2 LGBT people in your next film of 2020. You know, so then what they'll do is they'll be like, oh, let's hide like a gay couple in the background, or let's give this a side character 2 gay dads, and let's call it a day. We've now hit quota. You know, not saying this is what happens on paper, but that's what it feels like when I'm hearing these conversations coming from people up top. They're sort of like, how do we represent these people in a way that makes them happy, instead of like genuinely wanting to integrate them. And so, and as a Black man, it's really interesting to see because nobody really likes to talk about the fact that I'm Black, which is, it's ironic, but also not, because, you know, nobody likes to kind of like acknowledge the fact that like, I'm the only Black man at this lunch table, or like, hey, I'm the only Black person on this whole team, or like, hey, there's no Black people in this show. You know, it's like no one likes to talk about it because it makes them uncomfortable. And as a Black person, we're conditioned from a very young age to like stay silent to keep the peace. And that's why I kind of say being Black is kind of harder than being LGBT, because the issues affect a very small specific group. Whereas like LGBT issues, again, they transcend race and sort of ethnical backgrounds, or even sexual assignments, because it can affect anyone, you know, being LGBT. Which is why I think it's something that it's more talked about in animation, which I think I'm glad about. But it's hard. It is hard to navigate being both. It's very, very difficult. It's hard to kind of have a voice in the room because no one really wants to. Sorry, no one up top seems to really want to hear what you have to say because they can't relate. Sort of like indirect silencing, where you feel like your opinion's not welcome, and it's just something in the air. You know, you can see it by who's on your crew. You see it by like how much things are just not talked about or not acknowledged. There's a really weird colorblind view happening in animation that no one wants to really acknowledge. But to me, it's, you know, to me and any other, even any person of color, it's very clear as day. You know, that to an extent, depending on every show is a little bit different, but no one seems to like to point out the obvious, the elephant in the room.
We are recording this during a very large surge of the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm sure I've gotten white friends reaching out saying, oh, don't worry, I'm on your side, or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like this might start opening doors or conversations in a way? Or do you feel, I mean, I know this is kind of a heavy question.
No, that's great. That's great.
Do you feel that once this movement settles down from mainstream, people are just going to forget about it? Because as you know, you and I are both Black, and this is an ongoing thing within the Black community, and this movement's never quiet down or slow down for us.
Yeah.
But now, since all the white folks are in it. Do you feel like maybe this will actually help or shape or change the animation industry, or filling another quota, or I don't know. I also have a very pessimistic view.
No, it's that's a great question, and I think it's not pessimistic at all because it's our reality. It's something we experience. And actually, to answer your question, I would say that yeah, I think it's still gonna be a quota type thing because I'm already seeing it. I'll be very careful. Not I won't name any studios in specific, or any people that reached out to me in specific. But I can already see there are people kind of being like, "Hey, we want we like black people. We want this amount our black people at our studio or like on my team for this project. We want this." And I'm kind of sitting here being like, "You're not really addressing the issue, but like, yes, give us jobs."
Yeah.
So it's sort of like I think that white people need more time than they think they need to really understand the gravity of what's going on. I think a few of them are like empathizing, which is good, but that's not really understanding. I think it's gonna take like personally, I think it's gonna take like a couple of years for white people to really understand what's going on. Because even for black people, growing up black, you don't really get the scope of things until like it's years of growing up and living it that you kind of understand what's going on. And that's us being black. So like for white people, I think they're going to need maybe not as much time being adults, but they still need. It's going to take a few years of conditioning and unlearning actively. And I don't really have a lot of hope for animation, if only because it's still run by straight white guys. And as long as those people are up top, I don't think anything's going to change. So I guess my answer to the question would be if we replace them with predominantly women of color, that's when I think the animation industry will change. And I do specifically say women of color because I think that animation as a whole is still very like male centric. So while I think putting men of color in the position of power would be a good step forward, that's not going to be a real catalyst for any real change because then it's still going to be like straight men up top, even if they're men of color, and it's like we need to kind of like flip it upside down almost entirely in order for there to be any like a real surge of change, which is why I don't think you're pessimistic at all. I think you're actually quite right in not having a lot of like initial hope. I would be shocked to by white friends too, being like, "Oh, I totally on your side," or like, "We're one of the." Yeah, and I'm just like, I don't know. Like this is why I'll probably cancel. Because I'm just like, I really don't care about that. It's like it's not so much that like I don't care about the fact that they are reaching out. Like that much helps. It's like, but I'm sort of like these words don't mean anything because you should have been caring.
Yeah.
It's been it's like I was only a black person at school. I was only a black person on our team. I was only a black person, in our friend group. It's like, so why is it all of a sudden now you're on my side?
Yeah.
So that's why I kind of sit here and I go like, you have work to do. Go do your homework, then we'll talk about it, and then that's when we can start talking about you being on my side. That's just my take. I don't know. I have very strong opinions about that, but I do think there's hope. I do think there's hope for it because this is good. This is been a long time coming. We have the internet again, which is great. So I have seen a lot of white people using their resources wisely, and a lot of them are actually, at least a lot of the ones I know, are on the right path, which is very comforting to see. And a lot of the ones I've seen aren't performative. Some are, but the ones I've seen are like really digging into themselves, and they're kind of being a little more quiet. They're like studying, they're sitting with it, they're being uncomfortable, they're bringing up the conversation with their coworkers and their friends, people that we work with, and they're kind of like, "Hey, how do you feel about this? Like, let's talk about it." And that's really cool to see.
Yeah. So, outside of work, what kind of hobbies, side hustles, or interests do you engage in?
I'm so afraid I'm gonna like come off as like really boring. Because my initial reaction is that I don't really have traditional hobbies anymore. What I like to do is I like to try out new restaurants. I love to go out like clubbing and dancing, just exploring the city, getting into shenanigans with friends. I'm kind of like a situational social butterfly. I'm really like introverted, but I love being around people. I like going out. I used to do martial arts for years. That was my main hobby, but I had to discontinue that in high school, and I haven't gone back to it since. But other than that, I like video games. That's I don't know if that counts as a hobby.
No, it does.
I really like fighting games and getting good at fighting games, and I really love RPGs, so I'll do that a lot.
What are your top three favorite fighting games and your top three favorite RPGs?
Oh my god. Okay, my top three favorite fighting games. No one's heard of this one except for me, I guess, but it's Budokai Tenkaichi 2.
Oh, yep, I don't know that one.
Yeah, it's very specific. It's like you blinked and you missed it back in the mid 2000s. My second one is Super Smash Brothers, and my last one, God, it was a toss up, but I would say my last favorite fighting game is Clash of Ninja 2. It's Naruto. I was gonna say the Digimon fighting game, but that was one old one.
Oh.
Um, and then my favorite RPGs off the top of my head are Ocarina of Time, Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, and am I allowed to say the same? No, I'll pick a different one. I was gonna say I was gonna pick something from the same like universe.
What, Kingdom Hearts or Zelda?
I was gonna pick from the Zelda universe, but I'm like, no, I won't do that because they're very. I was gonna say Wind Waker, but I'm like, that's too similar.
Oh, you could say Wind Waker. Wind Waker is a great game.
I love Wind Waker. I know, but I was trying to be like special. Okay, I'll say Wind Waker for now.
Okay, for now.
Yeah.
And why Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix out of all the Kingdom Hearts games?
Oh man, it's so good. Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix, I think is the best. I think genuinely for me, it's one of the best RPGs I've played in my entire life. It has a perfect balance of gameplay, story, difficulty. The world building is beautiful. The levels are gorgeous. It's like it's free roam, like most good RPGs, but it's like it's just something about it. It's like it has a very unique style of gameplay that I just adore. Like fighting with a keyblade is just so you can. It's so cool.
What do you feel are the next steps in your journey?
Oh, I like this question. Okay, so because I'm extra, I think the next steps for me is to make a show. And that's very non-traditional because I know that typically you have to be storyboard revisionist and storyboard artist and like storyboard director, then whatever. But I don't know. For me, I've always had a clear vision and what I wanted to make. And I've always wanted to make a show. And I think I trust that I'm very responsible in gaining the experience I need before I do something. Like I never really do something like that I think is completely out of reach. I do think it's important to just kind of go for whatever, but I don't try to bite off way more than I can chew. And I think I'm at a place now where my, things I like, my style of execution has matured to a point where I think I'm ready to at least attempt the next step. And the reason why I want to become a showrunner is primarily because I want to bring a bunch of voices together that aren't being heard, like underrepresented voices, primarily from people in LGBT or, women of color or, people that are maybe disabled, and bring them all into one place and lift up those voices and collaborate with them to tell stories from my heart. And that's like, to me, that's something that's very sophisticated about animation because it is very much the art of collaboration. It's not the art of doing what you want and then just hoping it works out. It's how you bring out the best in the people you work with. And I want to see what I can make with like a bunch of people who, you know, I can share something with. We can make something special. So that's why I want. That's why Hope is next for me. That's what I'm gunning for, because I always I always love I always love doing stuff like that.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Okay, so you're gonna have to let us know when you hear any new development about this that you can legally share.
Yeah, no, of course. Like I'm just excited to be here. Like I'm still in awe that I'm even in the industry. Like it's it's super cool. But you'll be the first one. You'll be the first one to know. Like trust.
Ah, thank you. Okay, now's the time for rapid questions. Where I
I'm ready.
I'm glad you didn't groan. I have people groaning when I say this. So this is, as you know, the time where I ask a series of this or that, yes or no questions, and you answer them as quickly as possible. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
What is your favorite summer activity?
Sleeping. I'm not even gonna lie. I love sleeping. Sleeping is so good.
Who do you admire the most?
Gendy Tartakovsky.
Hmm. Good answer.
Thank you.
Chocolate or strawberry?
Chocolate.
Nice. Apples or bananas?
Apples.
Also nice. If you were famous, what would you be famous for?
Mm, telling uh, surprisingly dark stories hidden behind cheerful characters.
Perfect. On a scale from 1 to 10, how cool are you?
I'm like a -5. No, I'm kidding. I would say I'm a solid 6. I'll give myself a 6.
Aww.
Yeah, well, I don't know, 'cause I don't really do a lot. I just like sit there and I just like I just like exist. Like I'll do anything cool. I'm on a motorcycle or anything like that, so I can't really give myself like too many points.
Okay, that's fair. And still, very modest. What's your favorite season?
Winter.
What's your favorite season name?
But does butter count? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Listen, my favorite season is paprika.
Give me a word that starts with the letter W.
Um, Westchester.
Give me a different word.
Watermelon.
Give me a third one.
Uh, Wallaby.
Ah, okay. What is your favorite song?
It's the one I made my thesis film to. It's Twerk by John Hart.
What is the last band or artist you listened to?
Oh, this is unfair. It was Linkin Park, but it not. It was okay. It was Linkin Park because I was watching some like AMVs from like the mid 2000s.
Oh, Austin. You felt like adding that to Linkin Park was going to explain it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot of shame when it comes to that. I was like, time to go down memory lane. Linkin Park.
What kind of AMV?
It was like it was the Dragon Ball Z ones. Dead ass. Like, I have no shame. This is who I am.
That's okay. When I was younger, I used to watch those AMVs where they take two characters from two different properties.
Oh, I love those.
Yeah, those are.
They're so funny.
They're so funny, and it's always the angsty music.
Yeah.
So good.
They're amazing. Good taste. Good taste.
Okay, here's my for real last question. I want you to do an impression of a celebrity. That's not even a question, that's a request.
Impression of a celebrity.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, I don't even know what kind of.
Do you want me to give you a celebrity?
Give me a couple, yeah.
Okay. How about Lil Wayne?
Oh, that okay. This is this is fun. Okay. Wait, okay. Wait. I think I think I could do Lil Wayne.
Okay, then do Lil Wayne.
Okay, let me see for a second.
Okay.
Oh, this is gonna sound so bad. Hold on a minute. Okay, hold on. I gotta figure myself out. God, yo, what does this man sound like? He does like the Like a lollipop. like that. That's basically all I have.
Okay, I'll take it. Thank you. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Austin. Thank you so much for having this lovely conversation and also that lovely impression.
Thank you for having me.
Do you have any social media you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. My Instagram and my Twitter are both Roxin Rocks. ROXINROX. That's basically all I have because I don't. I'm mostly I try to stay off social media, but you can find me there. Hit me up. Say hello. I like talking to people.
And thank you, the listener, for tuning in. Please follow Creating in Color on Instagram and Twitter, and feel free to submit any questions for upcoming guests through our social media or our email, creatingincolorcast@gmail.com. If you are interested in following me, you can find me on Instagram and YouTube at Maybe It's Kaybe. Thanks to Namikaze for allowing us the use of his song. You can find more of his music on his SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Namikaze. That's Namikaze. I always have to read it like a robot because I will trip over the letters. Since Creating in Color is a new podcast, we appreciate any word of mouth or even help pushing our hashtag on social media, hashtag Creating in Color Cast. Before we wrap up, do you have any departing words of wisdom for everyone listening?
Yes, trust yourself. That will take you way further than you think it will. Trust yourself.
Thanks so much. This has been Creating in Color. Keep striving, keep trying, keep creating. Bye!